Hello, everybody. Welcome to Mindful Metal Jacket. Good morning, good afternoon, good night. Ooh, I went right into, what's that movie? Truman Show. Not a big fan. Loved it when I first saw it. Then it started to make less and less sense. And I'm not sure how great it really is, but maybe it is great. Maybe I should give it another chance. I don't know. Anyways, good to be here, folks. How you doing in the back? Hope you're doing well. Hope you had a good, healthy, safe week since last time I saw you. I've been having a nice time. I was out in Seattle and really living in the moment, hanging with my best friend and his wife, who's a dear friend, and his children, who I consider my niece and nephew, and we played and had a wonderful time, and oh, it was just the best, and I was away from my phone a lot. I downloaded this app called Moment. I highly recommend it. It keeps tracks of how many times you pick up your phone a day and how much time you spend on there, and then it also keeps track of, it's called In the Moment, and that's periods of 30 minutes or longer that you're not picking up your phone or looking at your phone. And it's nice. You try to set your high score. I've been down to under 2 hours the last 2 days. The first 2 days I've been using it. I went a little haywire with my phone last week because of the election stuff, and I become obsessed with the news and what's going on, and I can get wrapped up in that stuff, and it takes me to an unhealthy place mentally and probably physically too. And I'm reading this book that I think I've mentioned a couple times called How to Break Up with Your Phone, with an author named by the name of Catherine Price, who I'm trying to get on the show, actually. And she points out that the average person spends 4 hours a day on their phone. And if you spend 4 hours a day on your phone, that works out to being about 52 days a year that you're looking at your phone. It seems like a lot. Also, if you sleep for 7 hours a day, let's say, and then you're on your phone for 4 hours, that's 11 hours out of every day that you're sleeping, which is necessary, or looking at your phone. So I've been under 2 hours the last couple of days, but on Sunday I picked up my phone 168 times. Now, to be fair, I gathered some friends. I had a little Central Park hang, which I do think is essential for mental health and for giving up your phone, is to get around people. And so I've been picking up the mandolin again and reading more. I'm reading some Jack Kerouac. I've been on a real Kerouac kick. Who needs a house out in Hackensack? If you read Jack Kerouac. No, that didn't work. So put your phone down, for God's sakes. Get away from social media. I genuinely think it's destroying our society and us as individuals. And I don't know, maybe I talk about this too much, but I'll have Catherine Price on, hopefully, and we'll talk all about it. But anyways, I hope you're doing well and getting the amount of news that you need, and spending a lot of time with friends and family. That's what started all this. I was in Seattle with friends and family, and it was just the best. And so I'm going to try to do more of that, and I hope you do too. Hope you're doing well. I hope you're, I hope you're well. I won't dive too much into the other stuff, but I feel good. I'll say that. I'm hopeful, and I'm grateful, and I'm glad you're listening. I appreciate you listening. Today's a fun episode. I don't know if you're a sober person or thinking about becoming a sober person, but this episode may speak to you. There's a lot of sobriety, alcoholism talk on this one. But even if you're neither of those things, even if you're a moderate drinker or you drink a little bit, I think you'll find a lot of interesting stuff in this episode. My guest is Sam Morris, not to be confused with Sam Morrill. And Sam's a guy I met for the show. He's had listened to the show, and he reached out, and he's trying real hard to help people. He's a really interesting guy, former alcoholic, drug addict. You're going to hear all about his story and what he's doing now. And he's a really cool guy. Great guy. I mean, I only know him from this 1 hour conversation, some emails exchanged, but we were supposed to meet up and talk earlier, not meet up, but Zoom talk earlier. And then I had some time zone issues, and I was in Seattle. That's the problem with being away from your phone and present, is you miss out on a lot of emails and texts and times and everything. But it's a fair exchange, I guess. But anyways, we finally synced up last week and had a great conversation. I enjoyed the hell out of it. You'll hear. Sam basically tells his whole story, and it's fascinating and very similar to mine in a lot of ways, different in some ways, but it's pretty harrowing. But I think it'll inspire you, because he got out of some serious darkness and is now in the light and bringing some light to some other people, and including you, hopefully. And so I think you'll enjoy it. I enjoyed it very much. It flew by. Sometimes these conversations, they're never hard or a problem, but there's sometimes where you're like, shit, we're only at 22. I don't know what even to say. Interviewing is not my skill, or whatever you say. It's not my first, whatever, farts. Obviously, I can't even get that sentence out. So anyways, I hope that you're doing well. I hope that you'll make an effort to be away from your phone and social media more. I'm bad this morning. I got into some Twitter things, but trying to avoid that. Anyways, I feel good. I have some shows coming up. Well, not soon, but January 8th through the 10th, I'm at Helium in Philadelphia. I hope. We'll see what happens. We're getting our second wave and all that stuff. So, take precautions, everybody. It would help if we were all trying to do stuff, but we'll see what happens with that. But as of now, I'm in Philly then, and Foxborough, Massachusetts on the 27th of November. We'll see again with that one. We might be heading into some shit. Who knows? But hopefully, we're already in it, actually, I guess. But anyways, I'm going off the rails again. Let's get to our fun quotes. This one is from Sharon Salzberg, who's a past guest. She has a book called Real Change that I love. And she leads some loving kindness meditations. That's what we all need, right? If we had more loving kindness for ourselves, we might not be looking at our phones so much. So here's something she said you can say to yourself. Try it now. May I be safe. May I be happy. May I be healthy. May I live with ease. Maybe hit pause. Say those things to yourself. And then maybe masturbate. What's more loving than masturbation? All right. That got silly. I'm a silly guy. Enjoy this conversation with my new friend, Sam Morris. Thank you for listening. All right. We're live. Sam, good to meet you. Thanks for having me, or thanks for being on, whatever you say.
Yeah, I think that's my line. Thanks for having me.
Sorry. Yeah, of course, man. I'm excited to chat. We had a couple. We thought it was going to happen earlier, and I kind of fucked up, and I completely forgot. I've gotten wrapped up, and I was just telling you off air. I was out in Seattle with my best friend and his kids, and I was in my own world. He's got like a 7-year-old and a 4-year-old, and I was playing with them, and I'm trying to find this balance of, being away from the phone and trying to be present, and then also not just missing 100% of my emails and texts. It's hard to do.
That is a hard balance. Yes, I know. I walk that line with my notifications. Like I'm one of those guys that the red dot on the phone was made for me. Like I'm one of those guys that can't stand to see the red dot on the phone. So if I see one, I have to address it. And so the more of them, I find that balance of like, I need the important ones on, but if I have too many on, then I just get lost in whatever.
I'm the same exact way. It's funny. I read about you, and I'm like, I feel like our stories are so similar in so many ways. I'm excited to talk about all of it, but I'm the same way. I'm reading this book. I keep talking about it on the podcast called How to Break Up with Your Phone by a woman named Catherine Price, who I'm trying to get on the podcast. But she has all these tips. And one of the things she talks about that I got to try to do is you can set up your phone to respond automatically, which I've seen people do. You get like a text saying, hey, I'm driving right now, like an auto reply. And I got to start doing it of just an auto reply that says, hey, whatever it's, I'm driving, or I'm not looking at my phone for a while, because like you, I have that thing, just the little red dot, you have a text or an email, it makes me fucking nuts. I can feel it in my head. It's OCD, whatever it is.
I know. Yeah, definitely OCD. I see a dot in my phone. I'm like, I can't have that. I really dialed mine in doing the Flow Research Collective. It's these guys out of Australia and New Zealand, Rian Doris and Stephen Kotler, who wrote Becoming Superman, I think is the name of his book, but all about achieving flow state. And he just said, the enemy of flow is distraction. And
right.
So it's just so there for us.
Yeah, exactly. And like I said, like I go to Seattle and I'm like, I'm gonna be present with the kids and my buddy, and then you put everything away, and then 5 hours later you look and you're like, fuck, I got 6 emails and one's important, and my agent called, and my buddy texted, and I was supposed to walk with this guy, and then I feel all the anxiety I avoided in those 5 hours hits me tenfold.
Right.
Because I'm like, shit, and I scramble, and then I have to have that's where I'm trying to have that moment of mindfulness to be like, okay, they're just texts, they're people. And I don't know if you relate to this or have this, but my feeling, the reason I feel like I have to respond to texts and emails is that I'm like, these people hate me now. I haven't responded, so they think I'm a piece of shit. They hate me. And that's what I'm feeling.
Yeah, I get that too. Like, oh my God, this person, like, they think that I'm ignoring them, or they think that, like you hate them. Like they must be thinking like I did something wrong. And, honestly, like the read receipt on text messages is one of those things where it almost takes it off the table, because like, if you don't open it and read it, it's like, well, I haven't read it yet. So the person knows that I got delivered, but I haven't read it yet.
Yeah, I do that with like social media messages, Facebook messages, Instagram and stuff. I'll never open it, just so it never says I saw it.
Yeah.
And
it's a good way to manage expectation around that too, because people expect like the instant response, and when you don't respond, they're like, wait, you saw my message and you read it. Like, I just didn't have time.
Yeah. So I got to start doing this auto reply shit. And how are you on your phone? Are you addicted to your phone? Are you okay? Where are you at with social media and shit?
So I have, I've over time gotten a lot better at it. I've implemented some rules around social media where I do, throughout the day, I do Instagram and LinkedIn is where I do most of my work. So I'll go on to post. If it's before 4 p.m., I'll go on just to post, and then just let it be what it's going to be. And then after 4 p.m., I kind of let myself respond, or kind of dive in a little bit to like seeing what's going on and like interacting with other people. And then after 6 p.m. is when I kind of let it all go, and I just get like whatever happens. But I'm definitely hyper aware of my tendency to go down that rabbit hole with it, and I've actually gotten off Facebook because of it. I don't have the Facebook app on my phone. I'm not logged into Facebook anywhere, so it creates like another level of friction between me and Facebook. So I have to log in, I have to put my password in and all that. So I have some things in place that save me from myself, as Austin Powers would say.
Right.
Gold member.
Yeah. No, I got to start doing some of that shit. I don't have the Facebook app, but I check it on Internet Explorer or whatever it is. And I deleted the Twitter app, but occasionally I'll go on there. And Instagram, I'm on quite a bit, or too much probably. But
yeah, I find it's just, you just like, you really have to find your groove with it. And like, I know that like, and one thing, the Pomodoro timer, do you ever use those?
No, what's that?
So there's one app I love. It's called TickTick. It's like a to-do list app, but it has a timer built in, and you can set it for like, I have like a 45-minute block, I have a 60-minute block, and a 90-minute block, depending on what I want to do. And it basically locks your phone. You can log in obviously, but instead of, when you pick up your phone, instead of having like notifications up there, it'll just have the timer. So it kind of takes it out of sight, out of mind kind of thing. And you just, something about it, like the mental flip that gets switch that gets flipped, is it keeps you from like logging into the phone. So I use the Pomodoro timer quite a bit. I think they have an app too, like a strictly Pomodoro app.
Oh, maybe I'll check that out.
Egg
That sounds good.
timer, I think, is another one that you can use. But yeah, it really actually helps. It helps quite a bit.
In this book, How to Break Up with Your Phone, Catherine Price talks about an app called Moment. I don't know if you know that one.
Is that the one where you build trees or you build forests?
I don't think so. I haven't used it yet, but it sounds like what it is you what it puts a thing on all your apps that when you press a social media app and you touch it to open it, it takes 15 seconds to open. It just won't open for 15 seconds. So you kind of have to sit there.
Yeah.
And the hope is that
think about what you did.
Yeah, and then that time you're like, fuck this. And that sounds pretty good to me. I haven't tried it yet.
Sounds awful.
Yeah.
but also extremely useful.
Yeah, it sounds helpful, but I'm the kind of guy that there's so many things that I get advice or some kind of help or wisdom, and I'm like, that sounds good. I'll come back around to that in about 3 years or 6 months, whatever.
Right. Those screenshots in your phone, they're like, why did I screenshot that?
Yeah, exactly. Oh, I'm a huge screenshot guy. So let's go back a little bit here. Yeah. And I went hard into all that stuff and just jumped right in there. But tell me a little bit about yourself. You're a sober guy, much like myself. Yeah.
Nice. Yeah. How long you have sober?
It'll be 8 years, end of December. Hopefully, we'll see how this week goes. But
yeah, I'll be 8 years in about 17 days. Again, like we'll see how this week goes. But if things go according to plan, that's how it's gonna go.
Oh wow! So our sobriety is really close. Like we're like a few weeks apart from each other.
Yeah, November 21st is mine, 2012.
Oh wow! Okay, I'm December 28th, nice. 2012.
So you made it through Thanksgiving and Christmas.
Yes, I was just after Christmas. It was Christmas night that I was really like, right. Yeah. Which I always talk about. Christmas night for me, I got 100% alcohol gifts. All of my Christmas gifts were booze, and I was like, I'm the booze guy. Yeah. And there was a whole lot of other things but just that thing, hanging with family, making jokes, and everyone was like, what's wrong with you? And you're like, I don't know. And then I went tacked on a few more days for fun. But
yeah, my plan was, so I actually was sober for about 11 and a half months before September 20th of 2012. I fell off the wagon after 11 and a half months because I had a friend in town from high school and he offered me a beer at a football game. And I was like, yeah, sure. I've been sober about a year. I'm probably fixed by now. And so 2 months of just complete shit show. I mean, I was in the hospital I was in jail for 7 nights for a DUI, had my dog in the car when I got the DUI. Almost ran somebody off the road. I was blacked out. It was 7 a.m, middle of North Carolina. Hospital a few times. Job ended. House complete wreck. Drug dealer broke into my house, stole my TV. This is all within 2 months. And then my plan was okay, I'll hold on. It was about to be Thanksgiving, November 21st. I think Thanksgiving was must have been a Saturday or Sunday. Thanksgiving was that week. I was going to hang on through the holidays and then, get the ship righted after January. And it just got to the point it was 4 a.m. on the 21st of November, 2012. And I was sitting there at my kitchen table, alone. Everybody had just when I say everybody, I mean like these strangers and my drug dealer had just left. And I was sitting there looking at a pile of cocaine and a bunch of bottles of rum and just was like, yeah, I can't do it anymore. This is it. Wow. And so I called 911. It was like, you need to take me in. Like the thoughts I'm having are not good thoughts. And I need to be, locked up, not like jail, but like I need to go to like the psych ward. So I went to the psych ward and then 7 days there, right to a rehab in Michigan, another rehab in Utah, sober living in Utah. And then I ended up in San Francisco about 9 months later. And San Francisco, we can get into the whole backstory, but I'll kind of work in reverse here. San Francisco was the first city I had lived in as an adult, post-college, where I didn't have any drinking memories. I didn't have like my other cities. Like I lived in Miami for a bunch of years and Charlotte, North Carolina. And I had these Delray Beach, and I had every place I would go would have like this attachment of like, I got fucked up in that bar. I did cocaine in that bathroom, like, whatever, butt hookers there. Like it's all these bad memories. In San Francisco, because my normal MO is like, I moved to a new city, pulled a bunch of geographics in addiction. So I moved to a new city and like, well, how do you meet people? You go to bars.
Right.
And so, for an active alcoholic, that's a real bad recipe. So, in San Francisco, instead of doing that, I went to AA meetings, and I went to like the gym, and I went to like these healthy things that people were doing, hikes and meetups and stuff like that to meet sober people. And so what happened is that my life got extremely good, extremely quickly.
Right.
And, I found a career that I love, which is the kind of evolved into what I do now, but it started with personal training. And so the way my introduction to personal training is because I was a tennis player my whole life. So when I was really, really, really super young, I had a really, really bad allergies, like just a list of food allergies. So everything from like strawberries, pork, eggs, to peanuts, legumes, beans, apples, almonds, peaches, walnuts, like you name it, coconuts. Yeah. So I always like to say I was allergic to basically everything except water and air, except that I had asthma. So I was kind of allergic to air too. So I had these like this sickness as a kid. And so, it was two things that happened. One is I felt extremely separate and different from my peers. And, kids would make fun of me for my breathing, or that I couldn't eat a peanut. They would wave a peanut in front of my face. And so, that was traumatic, but at the same time, what was more traumatic was just like the straight fear of the world. If my parents weren't around and I was at a party, and growing up in Vermont, it's a lot of hay rides and barns and cows and horses with all that fur and dander flying around. So like there's a risk of an asthma attack pretty much every breath I would take. So I had this fear that I was either going to eat a peanut or have an asthma attack whenever I wasn't around my parents. And so that fear, in retrospect, I can look back and say that fear caused a lot of social anxiety in me. So instead of like gravitating towards team sports like baseball and soccer, and I did play those, but I always felt really out of place. And, there's like with soccer, for example, you're always running. And so that meant like I was always at risk for an asthma attack. Basketball, the same way. And so I picked up a tennis racket when I was about 6 or 7 years old. And, I took to it like a duck to water, whatever that saying is. Like, it was just natural to me, and it felt good, and it was an individual sport. And Andre Agassi was just starting to come on the scene at that point. And so I was like, this is awesome. Like, this is what I want to do. And so I had passion, I had love, I had talent, I had this drive to be a professional tennis player. So all through high school, my excuse went from like, I don't feel well, I can't go to these parties, to like, I'm playing tennis on the weekends. So I'm pretty much like putting in like a built-in defense for not going to parties, because I felt so anxious, socially anxious. And so through high school, it was always tennis was number one. And I would go to a few parties here and there, a really small town, so everyone knew each other. But this lasted all through college. And so, tennis was like the number one thing. And it took priority over drinking. It took priority over partying. It took priority over girls. It took priority over all the things that I would, quote unquote, what normal teenagers would do. And so after college, when tennis fell away, that's when the alcoholism kind of crept in. I had that void in my life of, my identity was gone. Basically, my identity was a tennis player, and like that was my thing, and I was committed. Like, I didn't really focus on academics. I did 4 years of college. I never got a diploma, but I played on the tennis team for 4 years. And so, my thing was, I'm not here for school. I'm here to, be a professional tennis player. Like, that's what I'm going to do after college. That didn't happen after a few injuries, but, that's when at, 22, 23, when I graduated college, that's when the drinking and partying really picked up. And so for 15 years, I was basically a mess.
Right. Now, so did you not start drinking at all? When did you have your first drink? Was that late?
Yeah, my first, I was a late bloomer in that one. My first real time I got drunk was, I think I was like 16. No, that's wrong. There was one time I got drunk at my parents' house. My parents went out for the night. My buddy stayed over at my house, and we did a few shots of whiskey or something like that. And we kind of laughed and run around the house and all that. The first time I went out to a party and got really drunk, I was like 17, I think. And, it was actually the first time that I had a consequence from it as well, because the next day I was supposed to play in the finals of a tennis tournament, and I was way too hungover. I just couldn't play. And I told my parents, I was like, I can't play in this tournament. I'm sorry. Like, I'm nauseous and throwing up and sweating and just headache and all the things. Right. So those were the 2 times before college that I got drunk. I was never really, I even smoking weed. I started, I think my first time I smoked weed was summer after my senior year of high school. Never smoked weed. Still to this day, never had a cigarette in my life. So the alcohol, all that stuff came in much later in life. And, through college, I would get drunk here and there, but I was never like, again, tennis was always way more important to me. And I somehow intuitively knew that if I was going to drink, tennis would suffer, and I didn't want that to happen. So go ahead.
No, interesting. I feel very similarly where I was late. I didn't drink till I was 18, almost 19. I never drank at all in high school. Mm-hmm. Same thing, never smoked a cigarette. And I was a runner in high school. I played baseball, but then I was a runner, and same thing. And I was like, I'm running, I'm an athlete, I'm all these things. And same exact day, high school ended. And then it was just kind of like, I wasn't going to college because I wanted to be a comedian, and which I was doing. Yeah. And it was the same thing of like, all right, maybe I'll try drinking. And I had nothing to prevent me from, there was no thing that was like, I better not drink because I have to run tomorrow. I have school tomorrow. Yeah. Once you take away any kind of responsibility, then it's off to the races, particularly for me and showbiz. Everyone else was drinking too. It's easy to find people that were drinking.
Yeah, so I'm sure that's one of those industries.
So when you drank the couple times in college, did you feel this change of like, oh my God, I see things clearly, but I got to play tennis? I mean, did you have any inkling of?
So I recognize that, I always would dread the social situations. That was something from, as long back as I can remember. It's just like not looking forward to being around people and in a group of people, feeling very awkward, like that whole, like the microscope's on me, the light's on me. And, we all know now that it's not, it's just like, that's the way we feel with anxiety.
Right.
And so I recognized that when I did drink, I was one of the cool kids. Like I was, talking to girls and telling jokes and laughing and dancing and doing all the things, like all that worry went away. That was the thing I noticed. So I said, I didn't recognize that as any sort of problem at the time. I just recognized it as, all right, if I'm going to be out doing social things, there's going to have to be alcohol involved.
Right. Yeah. I felt the same way. It's weird because there was a time in my life where I did feel comfortable socially. If I had my friend, it took a lot for me to make, I was good at making friends. And then once I felt close to those people, I felt very comfortable with those people. But I would always say, who's this guy? When someone else, which I still struggle with that. I'm like, we already have our group. Who's this asshole? And my inclination is to dislike and fear everybody new. That's the natural thing I have. But drinking made that less so. I get over here, you son of a bitch. Woo! I was that guy. So it became, it definitely helped socially. And I had the same thing. I can only socialize when I'm drinking. And in my mind, I'm like, I'm fun when I'm drinking. That's when I'm really fun and cool. For a while.
Yeah, there was like, one of the towards the end of my drinking, one of the big things I would always, because as the tail end of my drinking, it was like periods of sobriety and then a relapse, and it was a shit show for 2 months or 3 months or whatever. And so like my close friends, my girlfriends would always be like, like I really like sober Sam, and my immediate thought was like, well, that's cool, but I don't.
Right.
Like it was like I'm completely uncomfortable when I'm sober. Like, that's not going to work. So, I just fought to find that happy medium of like not the alcoholic version where, going missing for 4 days and staying up for a week at a time. Like not that guy, but like the guy that can find that balance of like, okay, I can handle myself and I feel good in these situations, but not out of control.
Right.
And, as an alcoholic, that's impossible.
So when you had anxiety, you talked about your whole life, even as a kid, and I feel the same way exactly. Anxiety, horrible anxiety, and eventually panic. Did panic attacks become part of your story?
Not until actually not till I really got sober. And it was like when something really bad would happen in sobriety. I would go into like the heart racing, and I wouldn't excuse me, I wouldn't say I ever had full on panic attacks, but I know what they look like, and I've seen them happen before, and I as close as I can get to them, that feeling of just like the world is caving in, like the reality is way too much, like if you're like, they would strike me a lot when I was going through heartbreak, is one of the big ones for me. And like, you go to sleep at night and get like an hour or two of sleep, and you wake up, and for that split second, you kind of forget the reality, and then it all comes rushing back, and you're just like panic mode.
Right.
Like, this reality is awful. I'm basically on death's door right now because my heart is so broken.
Right.
That was kind of my experience with extreme anxiety.
Yeah. So how long, once you start drinking, you're done with tennis now, you pick up the drinking, and how long before it starts to feel out of control? Did you feel it was like, Jesus, this is going to be a problem at some point, or was people telling you, or did it go okay for a little while?
Both. So the first two times that I mentioned in high school when I got drunk, they somehow gave me some sort of healthy respect for what's possible on alcohol. Just like, like I always say, a lot of alcoholics will say, like, I never got hungover, and I experienced that. Like, I didn't get the severe hangovers really. Like, I was, if it was a real aggressive party, I would. But what was more prevalent for me was the emotional hangover. It doesn't sit right with my soul. Like, something about that didn't feel right. Like, and every time I got drunk, like the first couple times there in high school, I would just, I had that emotion, that physical hangover that one time. The next time was more like, something about that just doesn't feel right. Like, if that's the way it's going to go, I'm not sure I'm interested in all that. Like, I noticed the kind of, I guess I didn't really resonate with the out of control feeling of it, and so for a while, I would always keep that in the back of my mind. And I would always say, like, well, the possibility here is that I will get really out of control. And so there were probably 3 times in college. I mean, and I drank like what a quote unquote normal college student would do, like maybe Friday and Saturday nights, maybe most weekends. But if there was a tennis tournament on Saturday, I wouldn't drink Friday, and I would save it for Saturday. I had that governor on it. But it was more so the just like some sort of awareness that, like, this could get out of hand. And so I would always have that built-in kind of like reins on it. And so, but as time went on, so there was a couple times in college, I remember thinking to myself, like, God, I was really out of control, more so than everybody else around me. And so then after college, I did control it to the point where, like, on the weekends I would rage, but I would always save it for, maybe Thursday night, Friday night, Saturday night, pull it together on Sunday, make it to work on Monday. And, it was, it's not an excuse, but like, everyone around me was doing the same thing.
Right.
And so from age 23, the real hardcore, like, slide down the cliff started at age 23 and ended at age 38. And so from 23 to 33, or 23 to 30 was like the steady decline of, like, that the progression of alcoholism is it's mostly fun. It's some fun, some bad, mostly bad with a little bit of fun, all bad.
Right.
23 to 30 was like that mostly fun with a few bad times in there. And then 30 to 33 was like definitely some bad times in there, but also some good times. And then 33 to 38 was just basically 95% terrible.
Yeah, that's the amazing thing to me about drinking. One of the fascinating things about drinking is you sort of romanticize, and then you're like, oh man, that was so much fun. And then you look back, and then you're like, actually, that wasn't fun. That was horrible. I wanted to kill myself that night. I just broke a bunch of shit. Yeah. And you're kind of, when you look back years later, you're kind of like, was that fun at all? I mean, certainly there was fun. I mean, like, exactly the way you described it early on, you're discovering it. And for me, like, I was meeting all these cool people and going, oh my God, I'm living the dream. I'm doing it. And like you said, there was that normal college drink. There was always people around that were drinking like you. I did the same thing again with comedy. I was able to find people that drank like me and also were older than me and had wives or even kids. And so it made it, well, my drinking's out of control and insane, but this guy's doing the same thing and he has a wife. So I'm fine.
So you're on the right path.
Yeah. So there was a lot of that, but it's always interesting to me when I mean, like you said, you had tennis, so you drank a few times, but it wasn't every night, and it wasn't until a couple of years later that it started to go really
Yeah, I'd say
haywire.
like, when I was probably about like 27, 26, 27 was when, I was known as the party guy. I started to be known as like, and it was like, it was either Sam's going to be okay and a good time tonight, or he's going to be completely incoherent and you can't talk to him.
Right.
And so I was I was developing that reputation, which to me, honestly, like when the tennis identity and the tennis went away, I started to install a new identity, which was a rock star. Like I wanted to be on a tour bus with Kid Rock, slamming Bush Lights. Like that was my life goal at the time. I wanted to be that. And so like it just naturally, of course, like I wanted to be that. And so I became that in my group of friends, to the detriment of a lot of nights.
Right. Now, were you a musician?
No.
No.
I just wanted to live the rock star life.
Yeah, see, I felt that way, and I romanticized. There's so many things and pieces of art that romanticize drinking. I would listen to like Tom Waits and feel like I'm at the end of a bar, this old grizzled, or these old Irish poets that I never read, but I was like, they're drunks, and Hemingway or whatever, and then all these Bill Hicks or whoever.
Hemingway. Yeah.
Yeah, so you kind of romanticize this idea.
Yeah, no, it's sexy. Sexy as hell. Like the Hemingway, write drunk, edit sober, that kind of thing.
Right.
That's romantic. And like to see all the like even like Hunter S. Thompson and Bill Murray and like all those guys like that were just like they make it look beautiful, but in reality, like it's not really that way.
Right. Yeah. It's just a mess looking, but I think it got a little, the video audio got a little fucked up there. I think we're caught up now though.
Oh.
I think it looked like I could hear you great, but your video is freezing, but that's all right. Nobody cares about the video.
I froze up.
But I think we're good now. But I heard everything you said, I think. And, yeah, I felt the same way. Like we said, the kind of the romanticizing, the sexiness of it, and then you realize, oh, I'm just a vandal. I was a big vandal. That was one of my many things. I would go out. I would get angry. I would start off the night. It was all extremes to me. I was the guy that's everything's great. Life is great. You love me. I love you. Fucking woo. And then it would hit a point where I'd be like, you hate me. I hate myself. I would literally go to the bathroom, just stare in the mirror for like a half hour, just call myself a piece of shit. And then it would get ugly as I would start vandalizing, stealing, breaking shit, smashing windows, breaking the antennas off cars and horrendous shit. I loved the parking garages, the big wooden arms. I would snap those off and whip them and run on the hoods of cars and stealing mailboxes, street signs. Just completely out of control. And it's stuff that I can't even like make amends for. I have no idea where I was or anything. I'm just like, I smashed somebody's fucking mailbox.
Yeah. I mean, I get it. It's that Jekyll and Hyde thing. Like you just, at what point does the pendulum shift there from, the happy guy or even like the okay drunk to the angry side.
Right. And so you mentioned drugs and Coke. When did that start coming in? So I'm grateful I never dealt with that.
Yeah, that came in, again, it was sporadic for a while from probably like end of college so I got married when I was 27. And when I met my wife, I was 25, ex-wife. When I met her, I was 25 and we did a lot of partying together. And that was like a circle where there was a lot of MDMA, ecstasy, cocaine, that kind of stuff. And so that really became part of the routine, I would say at age like 25, 26. And then at the bitter end, it was the alcohol and the cocaine that were there with me.
Right.
All the other stuff. I smoked a bunch of weed. I had no problem turning that off because it would make me so anxious when I smoked it. The ecstasy was like a 3-year phase that I went through, late 20s. Didn't really do much of that after that. Did some LSD in college. Did a bunch of mushrooms after college, like at festivals or concerts, stuff like that. But it really was like, it was like when I got divorced at 29 and moved down to Miami from Fort Lauderdale, that's when, like you talked about earlier, how you had like nothing in your life that would be like, you can't do this. It wasn't running anymore, baseball for you. And for me, like I went from tennis in college, and then I had about 2 years where it was kind of like free for all. But again, at this point, I still had control over it. And then I met my ex-wife at 25. So then I had, the relationship to take care of. So I kind of had that as a governor. And then at 29 was the first time in my life when I really had nothing. I had no like reins on my life at all. It was me. I was single in Miami, doing commercial real estate, making a bunch of money, having a bunch of free time. And so this was when, this is when people like would really be like, like, what's going on? Like, we all like to do cocaine and have a good time, but you are a next level. And so I was like, that's just me. Like, I'm just a rock star. Like, don't mind me. Let me do what I want to do. And so that eventually got to the point for the next 3 years where it was, 23 to 30 was that steady decline. And then 30 to 33 was pretty much just a drop off a cliff. Right. And when to get to the point where when I'm 33, I had a girlfriend for about 2 years. Great girlfriend. Like the first one that was like real heartbreak for me. And she actually refers to the last 6 months of our time together as the darkest time of her life.
Wow.
And I get it. Like, I mean, we haven't talked in a long time, but when I was, trying to get sober and make amends and get the girl back, she would tell me these things. And I'm just like, well, I see it now as like, I was going off into South Beach for 4 days at a time and not calling her, and like, getting like going out with her and ending up coming home alone. And she's somewhere in Miami by herself. And I'm like, just like terrible things. And I totally get it. But at age 33 was when there was a big shift in the sense of like, it was my first trip to rehab. I think I got it was my fourth DUI.
Wow.
But the first one I actually, went to jail for. It was just like an overnight in the drunk tank. But it was the first one that I was like, I really got to face the music on this one. And so I went to rehab for 28 days in the spring of 2007. And then I got out of rehab. And at this point, I was like, I'm not an alcoholic. I refused to call myself an alcoholic. And I had this conversation in my head because I mentioned I did have that like that kind of control over it for a while because I had that healthy fear. And so my thinking is like, okay, I just went too far down the road in the wrong direction. Like, no problem. I'll get back on the track. Just drink normally. Won't be a problem. And so that was my thinking for quite a while. And so I went away to rehab to basically make the judge happy. And I was tired at this point too. Like I had been for 3 years, been running pretty hard. And I was like, you know what? Timeout sounds good. I'm going to go. I'm on board with this rehab thing. I'll go. And so I stayed sober for about a week after that. And then within 2 weeks after that, it was right back into the same old behaviors. And this was when the girlfriend was like, listen, I love you, but I can't let you do this to me anymore. And I'm not going to watch you do this to yourself anymore. And wow. that was the first time when we talked about earlier about how like those panic attacks would set in and those like heightened, like extreme anxiety where like, like the world is spinning at 1,000 miles an hour and nothing feels good. You can't even watch TV, the memories, like all of it, just like complete and utter overwhelm. And this went on for like 6 months.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, good for her for asserting herself and setting boundaries. I mean,
absolutely.
But yeah, you mentioned it's always hard when you get sober and then you want to make amends for the things you did. And then you kind of want everyone to go, don't worry about it. Yeah, it's cool. And then they go, yeah, that was the worst time of my life. And you're like, fuck, why'd you have to say that, man? Like you kind of, you have to be out of the, like you said, out of the kind of stay out of the result. But there is that thing of it is hard to hear it, especially in sobriety, to hear like the damage you actually did do to people.
Yeah, especially when your intentions aren't in the right place.
Right.
If I'm going to apologize to this girl or make amends to this girl for the damage I had done, but my only intention really is to, like you just said, like expect her to be like, oh, come back, like run into my arms, right? And then my intention there is not to really apologize for what I did. It's to like say like, listen, look at me, I'm better. I'm sorry for what I did, but you're taking me back, right? And when they say no, it's a real shot.
Yeah, and you kind of left to be like, all right, shit, I guess I
Guess I'll
I
go
guess
get
I
drunk
really,
again.
I really fucked up.
Yeah.
So, and did you try to quit on your own in those other times? Did you say, hey, let me try to get a few days together even, or did you ever get any amount of days sober, not drinking at all?
Sporadically, yeah. Like, so my drinking thing was, my MO was binger. You know, like I could literally, all the way through, really, I could say, I'm not going to drink for 3 weeks. And, you know, I was white knuckling it, of course. Like, I wanted to drink, but if I had to prove something to somebody or my family or a girlfriend, like, I could say no and actually be pretty okay not picking. Like, I could have the liquor in my cabinet or have the drugs in the closet and be like, okay, they're there, but, you know, I can't, I'm okay not doing it. And
Right.
so my problem started when I would, that first sip, that first drink, like, then it's liable to be 5 or 6 days and you're not going to hear from me. You know,
Right.
I'm maybe end up in jail, maybe end up in the hospital, who knows where, hotel in South Beach. I don't know. And so, as far as like, yeah, so that first trip to rehab, got drunk afterwards. And then when the girlfriend broke up with me, finally she left and said, she's like, I can't do this anymore. That threw me into a tailspin of basically like 3 months of just blackout drunk or sleeping. There was no real awakening or awakeness of my life at all. It was just dark depression.
Right.
And then, so I finally was like, you know what, this pain is too much. I think that if I get sober, I can get this girl back. Cause we were still talking a little bit. And so I went to Utah to rehab in the fall of that year. And I had full intention of, you know what, I'm going to go to rehab in Utah. I'm going to come back to Miami. I'm going to call my girlfriend and we're going to get back together and I'll be sober because I'll get the girl back. And so I got back to Miami, called her, we had lunch. She's like, no, that ship sailed. And of course my heart sinks. And cause again, I'm making these amends with the wrong intention and my heart sinks, my stomach gets upset. But at the same time, I have this thing in the back of my head that says, oh, I don't have to be sober anymore. And so this proceeded 2 years, from 2008 till the middle of 2010 of just like, you know, I would drink for 6 months and then maybe like start to go to meetings for 30 days, maybe get 60 days, maybe get 2 weeks. But there were attempts, but they were meager attempts. And I didn't have any reason or like any desire really to be sober. I just knew that like a lot of people were asking questions and, you know, financially I was struggling and career wise I was struggling and my friends were all alienating me. So I kind of was like making these half-ass efforts to get sober. And that basic pattern went on for 5 years, from 33 to 38. And, you know, and within that time, there was 6 trips to rehab. There were 5 trips to rehab before the last one that finally did it for me. Wow. But, you know, it was like, and again, like in that time, there was a year of sobriety, there was 8 months of sobriety. There was, again, 30, 60, 90 days here and there, but yeah, it was not ever successful.
Yeah. It's funny what you're capable of out of spite or to prove a point, to have the ego. But I remember one time I went and did comedy in Iraq and Kuwait and overseas for like 10 days. And I'm talking to a buddy who was alcoholic in recovery. And I went, hey, I think I'm actually good, man. I just went 10 days without drinking. And he was like, that's good, you know? And I was like, I was in Iraq, and he's like, well, that's not sobriety. There's no alcohol there. Like, he's not, if you go to a place where alcohol is unavailable, you're not really getting, there's no sobriety. It's just unavailable to you. Of course you can do that.
No choice.
And of course, as soon as I was back, I was drinking again. But I'm so fascinated by stories, and I love war stories, but I feel like we only have 20 minutes left, 15 minutes left. I'm like, I want to get to some solution where you are now, because I know you struggled with anxiety, OCD. Obviously, you've gotten sober. How did you do that? Take me through some of that, and because I'm sure there's a lot of people that are interested in
solution.
Yeah,
I mean, the war stories, they're all fun and games, but they're all the same too.
Right, exactly.
What happened was that moment when I was 38, 8 years ago, you know, I was sitting at my table and I just like, it's one of those like spiritual experiences or out of body experiences, whatever you want to call it. It doesn't feel like it was me that stopped it, but I just knew, I saw, like, for some reason I got that moment of clarity where all the pain that I had caused myself, other people, girlfriends, mom, dad, sisters, all of that stuff just like was right in front of my face. And I was just looking at it. And I had seen my dad a couple of days before, and he looked like death warmed over, just like eyes sunken, looked at me and started crying. Like, he's like, every time you go back to Charlotte, I don't know if I'm ever going to see you again. And like all this, like these things were just ringing in my ears. And so from that point on, like I'm very, very blessed and very lucky and grateful that from that point on, I've never had the desire to pick up a drink again. I've never had like a craving. I never had any close calls or anything. But the thing that I did that was the most important thing was that I recognized, like, I had everything was stripped away from me at this point. I mean, money, girls, girlfriends, dog, house, career, car, family. My sister hadn't talked to me in 5 years. Like, I literally was at zero. And so I knew that I had to build. I knew that one of the keys to sobriety was two things. It was to build a life that I actually loved, like to put things in place in my life that actually mattered more to me than drinking did. And I knew that I had to find guys that I could talk to. I had to find like that core group of dudes that I could call if anything was going haywire. And, I call them, and we don't ever talk about, it's more about like heartbreak, or, my dad passed away in sobriety. My sister, she died of alcoholism in 2018. And like, I can call these guys about this stuff, about life, and to have those two things in place. And I did that over the next, so I was in basic treatment for 9 months, and then to San Francisco, I started meeting these really, like, I knew what I had to do. I knew I had to meet sober guys. I had to like build this sober life around like the things that matter to me. So that's being in shape. That's, doing fun stuff. That's going ski. I got back into skiing. I got back into playing tennis. And so all these things added up to this life that I had that I was actually proud of. And there's the one thing that was missing from my entire life before that. And it's crazy to think about this and to say this, but I just finished up my book, and I'm at that part in my book where this happened. And the word self-love, or like loving yourself, taking self-care, it never even crossed my lips until 38 years old, until I got sober. Like, it was introduced to me, and I'm like, what do you mean self-love? Like, yeah, I like myself when I'm drunk, or I like myself like certain, like conditionally almost. But again, I just never knew the concept of self-love. And so when I really started to dive into what self-love looks like, that was huge, because, when you can act from a place of self-love, a lot of questions get answered. If you're thinking about, going and having a drink, or getting some drugs, or doing something that even like as simple as like eating something that's bad for you, if you really loved yourself, would you do that? And so I had to like implement this concept, but it was so groundbreaking to me and was so new that like my life literally, and still does to this day, it feels like a new toy almost. Like when you're a kid and you get a toy, and it's like you can't wait to get up in the morning and play with it. Like, that's how it's been for me since I built this life, this sober life, and like all the things that I have now. Like, I know directly that if I was to even entertain the idea of picking up a drink, I'm putting everything I have in jeopardy.
Right.
And I'm just not interested in doing that.
Yeah, that's the nice thing. It's funny you mentioned I did that when I first got so like day one of sobriety, and I was like, similarly, I saw it so clearly. I was like, this is what I need to do. I get it now. Now I see it, and it's clear to me. I remember I made a list. And I should try to find it somewhere. I kept it somewhere. I made a list of like activities that I could do sober, that I used to do or be into. And I made a list of all the people I knew that were sober, because I knew a lot of sober people, because I had a big, in comedy, there's, so many people. But I remember sitting there being like, I'll go to museums. I'll watch a whole hockey game. And I think tennis was one of them. I could run, I love tennis myself. And I'm like, I'll start playing softball. Maybe I'll get into video game. Like, you start to go through, and it's strangely like, without realizing, it's kind of like a gratitude list of things that you enjoy in life. And you go, I used to find joy out of these things before I was a drunk lunatic. Like, when I was in high school, I ran, I played baseball, I watched sports, and hung out with people. That was something that was beneficial for me. Was kind of putting myself mentally back in the place I was before I drank. Like I'm like in high school, I was popular and had some fun. I had friends. I mean, I was, the most, I wasn't class president, but I had a group of friends, and I thought I could go back there again. So it is fun to kind of be like, there's a lot of things to value, and life is beautiful if you're actually living it and aware for it and awake for it.
Yeah, and another thing that I had a really twisted view on when I was drunk was what the idea of freedom is. When I was in my active alcoholism, like I considered being drunk freedom, because it meant that I was completely absolved of all responsibility. It meant like, don't call me, I'm drunk. Don't ask me to do anything, I'm drunk. And in reality, like if you're like, when you're drunk, you're trapped. Like you're trapped in that lane. Like all you can do is be drunk. But like I recognized when I first got sober, like one of the first things I knew I had to conquer was that social anxiety, because I love going to bars to watch football games. I love going to football games. I love going to concerts. Like I love all these things, but I knew I couldn't be sober. So I had to learn how to like socialize sober. And one of the things that got me was like, if I'm not here drunk, like I'm not tied to anything. Like I can drive myself home if I want to. I can leave whenever I want. Like I don't have to worry about getting home before the stores close so I can get a bunch of liquor to last me through the night. Like there was so much freedom in sobriety that I thought was freedom, that I thought was prison before. And it just like, it flipped the whole freedom and prison conversation for me.
Yeah, it's funny you say that. Again, I identify so much. I've told this story before on this podcast. I had a long talk the day before I got sober with a comic who's not a sober guy, but he doesn't drink. And we were talking, and I was making a case for why I should keep drinking. And one of my things was exactly like that. I was like, well, what happens when I'm at a party or a function and I hate everybody there? It's just like, they're all assholes. And he said, you go home. And it was like this unbelievable, like, it's so funny to me, but I'm like, that literally had never occurred to me to go home. I thought, because it goes back to that romanticism of drinking, of like, I'm out all night, I'm living life to the fullest, I'm out till sun comes up. And the go home thing really was like, right, that, like, and exactly like you said, it's freedom. And I'm like, I'll go watch a movie, I'll go fucking play whatever the hell, who cares?
You can do whatever you want.
Yeah, exactly. And sobriety for me, and a lot of people listening aren't alcoholics, but it's not just sobriety, but it's living a life where you're present and aware and enjoying life. It really does free up a lot of things. I could read a book, that would be something, instead of vandalizing.
Yeah, and then the next day, you have the entire next day to do whatever you want to. Like you can actually get up in the morning and have a day.
Right.
That's a massive plus too.
Yeah, that was another thing with me getting sober, was I was losing days by the hangover, the physical hangover, as well as the emotional hangover, and also the feeling like you talked about. For me with sobriety is never waking up and being like, who did I text, or how did I get home, or where is my car? The feeling of remembering everything. And again, if you're listening, even if you never were an alcoholic, you could just be grateful that, like, hey, I have a sharp memory. I mean, what a beautiful thing to be grateful for, that like I remember the things I said yesterday, and I have the freedom to do some things that are fun today.
Yeah, the freedom the freedom of choice is the real, I think, basis for happiness in life. And whether alcoholic or not aside, like mental health aside, like if you have that in your life, if you have the freedom to make choices and to be there for your family and to show up for life, like that is the real basis of what any sort of happiness looks like.
Right. And so with OCD, because I'm an OCD sufferer myself, what are you doing there? How does that work for you?
I wouldn't go so far as to say I have full on OCD, but I definitely have things that have, like that level of control of your life, when you just like feel that out of control thought process, those out of control obsessive thinking patterns. Like the obsessive thinking is what gets me the most. And it's like, I have to like, really, it comes down to like, I like to call it data over drama. Like, do I want to pay attention to the drama, the obsessive thinking, the repetitive behaviors, all this stuff that's kind of the drama of it. The data is like, what's true? Like, let's look at what is actually true. And this goes for anxiety too. Anxiety is it's not something I deal with pretty. I mean, again, to say I deal with anxiety now is way overstating it, but like it's there. Like, it's one of those things that never really goes away. But like, I know for a fact that if I can get into the facts of a situation, like this is what's actually true, that will calm down all the things in my life. My behaviors, my thoughts, my interactions, the way I show up, like all this stuff will, if I can just stay in its present moment awareness is what it is, and it keeps the depression at bay. It keeps the anxiety at bay. It keeps all those things that can just spiral you out of control in check.
Yeah. What my mantra that I always share on here is fear is just fear, and my thoughts are not reality. And those things really help me, because I can still go down that hole quickly. I mean, I have a dentist appointment tomorrow. I have such horrendous dental fears that I talk about all the time. And it's not even it's not even a root canal or anything. I go all the time, but it's on my mind. It's like, it's fucking up my quality of life today, just knowing that I have to go. But again, I have to get back into the reality of like, it'll be fine. I'll be there for fucking 10 minutes. And it's not the end of the world. But in my mind, I'm already like, I'm getting the crown put on. It's not going to fit. They're going to have to pull the tooth. It's going to be great. I'm going to have cancer by the end of it. Forget it.
All just stories.
Yeah, exactly. It's just stories, and it's future tripping and all that shit. So what goes on? So what do you do now? You're helping people, and
so now, so I was doing coaching for a while. I started off personal training, and then I got into some recovery coaching, sobriety coaching, where I would get guys. One of the things about rehab that always tripped me up was that there's no step down out of rehab. Like, there's no real way to recalibrate back into a life, especially as like an older adult, like a 30-plus-year-old adult. Like, you get out of rehab and you've been in rehab in a safe environment container for 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, whatever it is. And you're like, you step into life and you're like, what the hell? This is crazy. And so like, I would just help guys with that recalibration. And then as I was doing that, I understood that like all these guys dealt with depression and anxiety or some sort of mental illness at the base level of their inability to cope with life. So I kind of evolved my practice into helping guys with mental health. And now I've moved into like doing men's work. So working with like masculine, feminine energies and the toxic masculinity stuff, like creating a space for guys to come and to be open and honest and vulnerable about what they're really dealing with. Cause the numbers are just staggering about guys. I think it's like 30% of all guys at some point in their life either have suffered, will suffer, or are going to suffer from some sort of mental illness. Out of that 30%, only 1 in 4 will actually even talk about it. That's a very low number of all the guys that are out there. And so the silent sufferers end up in suicide. That's the end game for them. And so my thing is like, I want to create a space where men can talk about like the feminine energy and the masculine energy and find that balance and get vulnerable about like what they're scared of, what overwhelms them, and why they feel uncomfortable in their marriage, for example, or what their fears are about like like a lot of this stuff with COVID. Like, guys have had their identities ripped away from them because of 25 years of being in the workforce, and that whether they still have a job or not, they're not going to the office. So it's a big life change. And so I'm now working on, in 2021, like I said, I just finished up my book that's going to publish in January, working on men's retreats, men's workshops, and just trying to get on stages and podcasts and talk about creating this. I want guys to know, like, I'm available. There's a space out there that they can come to if they're struggling and they don't have anybody to talk to, and they feel like if they do talk to anybody that their life will be shattered. It's not true. And the space is out there. There's guys doing it.
Wow, that sounds great and extremely rewarding for you and for them, obviously. And I love anything that's dedicated to service and helping people, especially in that realm. So where can people find you or find more or contact you? How does that work?
So the best way to find me is on either Instagram or LinkedIn. On Instagram, I'm at samgibbsmorris.com, or not .com, at Sam Gibbs Morris. LinkedIn, just my name, Sam Morris. And then if you want to email me, you can email connect@samgibbsmorris.com. And I can shoot you over some stuff. There's my coaching, my one-on-one coaching, VIP coaching is available at Samuel Gibbs Morris /optimize your life. you can look into my programs there.
Awesome. Yeah, I'll make sure to put all this stuff in the
I can shoot you an email
description.
With that stuff too.
Yeah. Please do that. Sam, this has been great, man. I mean, I've really enjoyed it. I hope you did as well. Is there anything else you want to add or mention that we didn't get to? Sorry, I took you through the war stories for like a while.
It's all
there.
good. It's all good, brother. This was great, man. It's such a good conversation. I mean, we do have so much in our stories are just like lined up like crazy. So it was awesome, man. Thank you so much for having me on. The only thing I would say is like, one of the things that trips up people a lot is that people are afraid to say, I don't know. They're afraid to be beginners because it makes them look stupid, because it questions their masculinity or their kind of manhood. The idea is that if you allow yourself to be a beginner, there nothing but good things can happen for you. Just allow yourself to be a beginner in everything you do. And it's the fastest way to success. It's the fastest way to achieve goals. It's the fastest way to overcome any kind of mental illness or anything like that.
Hell yeah. I love that. Sam, thanks so much, man. I appreciate it. And I'm glad we finally connected. Sorry again about last week. And this was great. Thanks so much, man.
All good, man. Thank you very much too.
Appreciate it.
Mindful Metal Jacket is hosted by comedian Joe List. Produced by Joe List. Edited by Matt Kleinschmidt. Executive producers Robert Kelly and Matt Kleinschmidt for the Laugh Button Podcasts.